Welcome to the Value Innovation Pricing Podcast, where we put value at the heart of every conversation. I'm your host, Karen Chiang, Chief Value Officer at Ibbaka. And today we're delighted to welcome a standout leader in value-based pricing and strategy, my friend and colleague at Ibbaka, Rashaqa Rahman. Rashaqa is a principal consultant at our firm. She's a proven business strategist whose expertise spans some of the world's most innovative companies. She specializes in defining the economic value of complex innovations into clear, measurable outcomes. Together, we have helped organizations position and set new standards for value and price, leading to better customer engagement, higher contract values, and overall increases in revenue. Rashaqa, I thought it would be great to have you on the show today to share a little bit about Ibbaka's view on value, innovation, and price. Welcome.
Thank you for having me on the podcast, Karen. I'm really looking forward to our chat. Great to be here.
So let's just start with the question I always start with, which is, what does value mean in your work, and what impact have you seen?
For me, Karen, it's three different things. When I think about value, it's understanding value, delivering value, and then monetizing value. So these are very different things, and they all have to be approached with the same level of rigor. And it has to be in that order: understanding, delivering, and then monetizing. I've been doing this for quite a number of years now, Karen, and if you get the order wrong, there's a very high probability that it's going to lead to some sort of detrimental business impact. And we see this over and over. So either you're going to get your product market fit wrong, or you're going to get your product roadmap derailed. And it's hard to come back from that because there's quite a lot of investment there, both monetary investment and human investment that goes into it. So it's really hard to come back for that. Or you're going to, face pricing challenges. And of course, this is something that we see day in and day out. So for me, kind of value is just this three multi-pronged approach: understanding, delivering, and then monetizing in that order. And sometimes the way I see it is, and it's hard for people to wrap their heads around it, because when you think about pricing, you think, dollar values, but to me, when you think about value-based pricing, value is the starting point and value is the finish line, right? So there's so many external factors contributing to value perception. And some of these are out of our control. So there are the market factors, there are the macroeconomic factors that oftentimes we have absolutely no control over. And of course, there's the competitive landscape. So all of these add variability. And when we think about value, it just feels like this thing that you put out there. It's like all airy, fairy, and one of those catchphrases in value-based pricing, but it's not. When it's done right, it's actually very scientific. It's not simple, but it could be. You just need a structured approach to really do a deep dive and have this multi-pronged approach to understanding value. And once you do that, value-based pricing should be relatively easier cakewalk.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about understanding value. So I know here at Ibbaka, we have, ways in which we try to understand value. And I think if others have heard a lot of our talks in the past, we talk, of course, about the economic value. For us, we've also spoken about emotional value. And then an area which I really like to delve into, which is more the community and citizens impact piece of value. Are you able to sort of share some scenarios where, these come into play?
Absolutely. And I know that we have these three distinct categories of economic value, emotional value, and community value, but a lot of the times when we do the voice of the customer research work, the line is pretty much blurred. You can go in, the goal really is to kind of have an open mind and understand from the end user, the customer, how value is being perceived and value is being delivered. And sometimes, you will find that you can go ahead and try to kind of quantify economic value of an offer, and you will have a large, big conversation around it. And it turns out, even if you do come away with a large dollar figure associated with, say, a cost efficiency, the key trigger on their end is the emotional value, the peace of mind, or some sort of, having a process in place that lends to that cost efficiency where you can have a dollar value associated with it, but it is that emotional value that, is at the forefront. So I think, yes, we do have these three categories, and they are very, very, they're all important. All important. You have to have a well-rounded understanding of the value to start designing the pricing around it. And of course, you have to have an understanding of the economic value, and then, use that as the stepping stone to design your pricing. But it is all of the other, the added qualitative elements of voice of the customer research work that really adds, you know, lends to the efficacy of your pricing per se. What are the emotional drivers? Sure, this is the economic impact, this is the ROI, but how do you position this ROI, right? What do you lead with? So yeah, I think it's good to understand the structure, have the structure, but also you have to keep an open mind because a lot of the times, you will learn a lot from the end user in terms of how value has been perceived and what direction you should take with it.
Yes, I think that is really important. And we've emphasized this before, where value is actually has to really be from the perception of your buyer, of your prospect, of your customer. Oftentimes we try to seen where, product teams will, act in a little bit of a vacuum because they take a few assumptions. But really you need to be able to really validate
Mhm.
what really matters to these buyers. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how value changes depending on who the stakeholder is involved, right? Because I think that we have companies which sell to, multiple segments. They
Mhm.
have different use cases. So really, when it comes to defining that value proposition and even building the business case,
Mhm.
that may be different for different groups of people. Can you speak a little bit about
Absolutely.
that?
You know what? Let me share a real world example with you, right? And I will speak to this. So, as I said, the whole approach is quite rigorous and scientific, right? And I had done um, some extensive voice of the customer research work for a very large global industrial automation software provider, like a big organization, right? And then they came to us with a directive as to what they actually wanted. The goal was to optimize their existing legacy pricing for one of their solutions. And they kind of had their parameters laid out for us. They wanted us to switch up the payment model. This is kind of quite normal, right? They wanted to switch to subscription, and they wanted to kind of price up certain supporting services that they weren't kind of charging for to date. So those were the parameters that we were working with. We were to kind of optimize their existing pricing based on certain parameters. And they kind of um, had an idea of where what they wanted to go directionally with the product. They had an idea of where they wanted to go directionally with the pricing, and they believed that they had an understanding of what the product was and how it was creating value, right?
Mhm.
So, of course, as part of our due diligence, we undertook the voice of the customer research work. Um, and once we got started, it was incredible. We got such detailed feedback from a very engaged customer base. And that in itself is one of those things. If you have a very engaged audience who is willing to share so much with you, it is an indication of there's much to be said, right? Maybe there's a need that is not exactly getting fulfilled. These are customers who've been long-term customers, yet they're spending a lot of time sharing their thoughts with you, which in fact tells you that, maybe there's more to the story, right?
Mhm.
More to the story than meets the eye. So we went in, we had our directives. So we went in kind of looking to understand the economic value of the solution, like how much value was being created. But we came away with a deep understanding of the different ways that different industries were perceiving the value, and not only different industries, different customers within the same industry vertical had a completely different take on value perception, right? And you have to keep in mind, this is a B2B industrial software. This is not B2C. You don't expect that level of variability. There's just that many things a software solution can do within industrial automation. Yet we were getting so many different types of feedback, right? So
Mhm.
as a result of that, we came away understanding not only, having a deeper understanding of the value, but just the different ways value was being created. And that in turn, as you said, translated in business speak to the different use cases, right, for the solution. So that was a good starting
Yes.
point. And once we had that, we were able to come away with validated economic estimates, the dollar value for these distinct use cases. And we were then able to design the tiered pricing for each of the different use cases. Now, you'll see this is quite a bit of shift. It's a long ways from the original directive, right? We almost
Yes.
went from a evolutionary tactic to complete revolution, right?
Mhm.
Um, but if we didn't do all of that due diligence, we would have just stuck with the evolution of the legacy pricing, and that would have never captured the full economic potential of the solution, right?
Perfect. And I love that because, again, this is something, for us as, consultants in the field, we really want to work collaboratively, not only with our customer, but as you say, having that engagement with our customers, and really getting to the understanding of how they perceive value and trying to then find patterns for the various use cases is something that, as you said, there's a method and there is a science behind it as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that's great. So I'm going to move on to the next piece that you mentioned, which you said, okay, first we have to understand, then next is we have to deliver. And
Mm-hmm.
then you put delivery before monetize. But I know that a lot of companies, obviously, they want to monetize before delivering. And then we talk about things like time to value, because of course you're charging people before they actually realize some of that value. So can you sort of explain to me that part around delivery? Because I think there is that delivery, which even happens, from the get-go, right? So even as we're
Mm-hmm.
doing these voice of customer uh,
Mm-hmm.
validation, qualitative analysis. I mean, in fact, we are providing value because we're actually listening to what their needs are with the hope of being able to serve our customers better. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that delivery of value.
Absolutely right. The voice of the customer research work adds an incredible amount of goodwill, right, for the organization that we do the research for, because again, it goes hand in hand with that value delivery or the promise of better value delivery, right? So the reason I call out value delivery before monetization is um, because there is a credibility factor, right? Here, when there is an understanding of value, and then there is a monetization of value, but it is here where it lends to the credibility. You have to have an indicator of some sort, whether it's a full delivery, whether it is through conversations, initial conversations, because a lot of the times there is a time to value element, as you said. You kind of purchase a service, right? Or a product, but by the time you actually see results, it might be 3 months to 6 months to a year, depending on the nature of the solution. However, there's many ways to deliver value. Yeah,
Yes.
there is the promise of delivery. There is the promise of a certain value in terms of delivery, or touch bases, or just anything that lends to that credibility is what I call value delivery. And it doesn't necessarily have to be through the solution itself, but it could be at any point over the course of the customer engagement. And it starts from the very first touch point.
I love that. And of course, you and I have done work on really understanding the customer journey and the
Mhm.
customer journey, mapping it to our customers' buying process. But yeah, just before this call, I was actually on a discovery call with a potential prospect.
Mhm.
And I think there were a number of times on that call where the customer actually thanked us for highlighting things that they needed to consider. So
Mhm.
again, it's like we haven't sold them anything yet, but
That's
we
right.
were able to share some insights and, of course, be prepared to understand their business, to sort of recognize where they are to then sort of say, hey, how can we work collaboratively with
Mhm.
you to resolve X, Y, and Z? So I think that part about demonstration of delivery of value before you even sell the product
Mhm.
or your offer becomes really important. And of course, that ability to deliver that value throughout time and understanding how that shifts over time becomes really important. So I love the fact that you put the monetization part last, because
Mhm.
obviously, you know, a lot of firms and companies come to us because their first response is, hey, I've got a pricing problem.
Mhm.
I don't think we're capturing enough for the value we provide.
Mhm.
Something's wrong here. You got to fix our pricing. So
Yeah,
can you now shift to the pricing aspect
absolutely.
of
So when
monetization?
somebody says you have to fix our pricing, sure, you can spin up an excellent spreadsheet, right? With the new shiny new pricing, you can do all sorts of sensitivity analysis, but that doesn't really fix the pricing. You have a new pricing that has the potential to be more successful, but will it be more successful, right? Are you monetizing on the value? Sure, you have a new pricing and it might be just the right approach, but somebody has to deliver on it, right? So this is where I think when I say monetization of value, it is not just the pricing. It is the whole process that gets to that monetization for you to be able to capture a share of the value that you're creating for the customer, right? So for example, in the previous example that I just spoke of, the evolution to revolutions design strategy that we took there, it was it was incredibly well received by the organization. Now, the question is, for most people, the first thing that he would say is, okay, we've learned a lot of things, but doesn't this shake things up too much, right? Isn't
Yes.
it too divergent from the legacy pricing? Isn't it so much work? Yes and no. So it is a considerable amount of work. Like there's no sugarcoating it. It is a considerable amount of work at the beginning stages of this value journey. Yes, but if you do it right once, it's a lot less work down the line, right? So for a global company, why is this well received, right? There's a lot of moving pieces within the cog of this magnitude. But for them, having done this due diligence, having taken the time, which took a lot longer than we had initially anticipated, we now have a process in place, right? One,
Mhm.
it's very hard to get processes right. It's just incredibly hard to get that baseline correct. Then there's a justification for the value proposition, right? The value is defendable. The new pricing is defendable. And once the pricing is defendable, the probability of successful execution grows exponentially, right? It's not guaranteed, but it grows exponentially. So you can get away from the guesswork around pricing, around ad hoc discounting, and adding complexity to a pricing book that is very hard to execute on in the first place. And also there's the human aspect of it, right? When you think about monetizing value, you can give the folks on the ground, the sales folks, whose job it is really to execute on the pricing and value communications, you can empower them. You can give them the confidence to go out there and sell while putting value in the forefront. And it's easier said than done, really, right? So when you have
Mhm.
a process like this in place, you can enable them to have those human conversations around pricing that is based on science. So all of this is scientific. It has rigor, but at the end of the day, it's not spreadsheets. You are having a human conversation. And this is the kind of work that enables them to be able to do that with confidence, right? When you talk about value, it's not all smoke and mirrors. Sometimes it is, and when that is the case, that is when you are probably leaving money on the table, or just if you're not confident in the value communication and it's all smoke and mirror, you're never going to get to the full potential. So, but as I said, and I keep harping on it because I eat, breathe, live this, right? There is a science to it, and it's the scientific approach that can lend to the credibility of your value claims, and that is the monetization bit. It is a process. It's not just one thing, but it is something that touches everyone, all the stakeholders within an organization, and of course your customer base.
Yes, and I've always said that value pricing I mean, and when you launch for commercialization, it is a team sport.
Mhm.
So really, as you say, this back end work that needs to be done beforehand to obviously bring the team together and align the team in terms of, hey, what is it that we're trying to achieve here?
Mhm.
And getting to that solid standard sort of communication
Mhm.
strategy is also key. One of the other points that you touched on is, you this is one case where, again, it was that collaborative exercise where we were able to, shift from simply evolution to revolution of a pricing strategy. And I know that oftentimes though, because I was on another call earlier this week and I actually asked this question, right? In terms of readiness for how to say disruption, right? So how ready are you to really disrupt
Mhm.
when it comes to launching, pricing or a new approach to pricing? And I would
Mhm.
say that the majority of people we talk to, it is all about risk, right? It's
Yeah.
about managing the risk of the introduction of the new price. And so in most cases, how people approach this is to sort of say, well, I'm just looking to increase my average contract value by X
Mhm.
percentage. Because if I do that across the board, then, I'll get, a revenue increase of X,
Mhm.
right? So, do you want to share a little bit about that experience as well?
About the risk factor.
Yes,
So,
and how we're mitigating that, right? Because it is
so
really more so about when we think about migration or change of
yeah.
price, it is about mitigating that risk. So as you say, part of it is the validation and this homework. But then how is it that, so what are some of the techniques that we have used to really
Mhm.
work with the team to get to alignment?
Absolutely. So, of course, there is that risk factor, right, around this. And this is where, so when we think about, well, to kind of put it in context, right, listening to the voice of the customer, our clients are our customers as well. And we need to listen to the voice of our customers as well and the value that we are creating there. Now, when we do a lot of this value-based work, we always have to keep in mind the parameters within which they're operating, right? What is their risk tolerance, right? How much disruption can we actually do without, having any detrimental impacts on their existing workflow or, just their KPIs and all of those things. But the goal of doing all of this groundwork is to come away with an understanding of how we would migrate. It's because at the end of the day, it's very easy to say, this is what we've heard from your customers. You must change your packaging to do XYZ. You must change your pricing to do XYZ, and that will get you to that average contract value or whatever goals that we set out at the very, very beginning. But the goal really is to work backwards from that goal and see what is actually possible. Now, this, as I say, this is a scientific approach, but this is not a magic wand, right?
Mhm.
Just because you have learned something, there is also a learning curve within the market, learning curve within your customers. There's also a learning curve for the boots on the ground on effectively communicating that value and getting the response that you're looking for. So we would never recommend going completely cold turkey and say, you know what, we're going to do absolute revolutionary things. We're going to change up the pricing completely. You have to look at the legacy processes. You have to look at the grandfathered customers. You have to think about discounting and, different ways to incentivize not only your workforce, but also your customers to come along with you on this journey. It is difficult, especially when it comes to change management. It will never be immediate. But you have to stick with it. The goal here is to have a process that you can stick with and, go with it over a longer period of time so you can learn from, these communications, these different stages of communications, these different stages of iteration till you get to your end goal.
Perfect. And you know what? I know that a gauge for us as well is so one of the best testimonials we have received, as you know, is when our customer, who's typically sometimes the product lead, who's the champion.
Yeah.
And, a big part of their role is sales enablement. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the testimonials that always sticks in my mind is when this product leader basically said that when they did the sales enablement training and they
Mm-hmm.
had no pushback on the new pricing, and they were able to fully understand how they would position and transition their customers, that was like a huge win for us. So thank you for that. So the next question I have is, so given this, what's next? And maybe I'm going to actually lead with this question because I just came off a call where, a company is trying to augment their offering with an AI offering. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then what's happening there in the pricing world is that, these augmented solutions with AI, they are really trying to understand how they should really go forward with pricing,
Mm-hmm.
because there isn't really any sort of set formula, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's, hey, can we sort of should we be looking at the tokens,
Mm-hmm.
credits? Is it something that we sort of build into the tiers? Do we look at something that's hybrid? Uh, and all I can say is that this is all very early stage,
Mm-hmm.
but then the risk here is more so, or what I hear, and this is a common risk that we hear from our customers as well, is how do we really allocate and think about the cost structure in a way that is, more predictable for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but also predictable for our customers. And I know that's a very long conversation, Rashaqa, so you can actually tell me, okay, Karen, that's a big question. We should just do another talk.
It is a big question, but also it is a shifting landscape and it is shifting very, very quickly, right? Yesterday's, big idea is history today. So it's one of those things where, what I think about AI? AI is almost table stakes. Everybody's talking about AI. It is almost like everything has to be AI enhanced. True. Um, but it's also one of those pivotal moments, I think, in our lives where, there was a gold rush and now there's the AI rush. And I think when, hindsight is always 2020, I think a couple of years down the line, we'll look back and see, probably laugh at how much we were running around like headless chickens trying to understand what direction this is going to take. Having said that, though, AI is incredibly powerful, right? It has completely changed the way we do our work as well, right? How we price for AI going forward is something that we're going to have to think long and hard about. And we also have to make sure that this is something that is sustainable because it is an incredibly fast changing landscape. And it will also need very quick evolutions, I think. But from the perspective of just shaking up value and pricing itself, I think AI is here to stay. I wouldn't say it's going to be shaking up value and pricing. I would say more along the lines of, adding rigor to a trusted and time-tested methodology that we have carved out over the last few years.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that if you have been tiptoeing around value and pricing, uh, or value-based pricing, there's never been a better time. I think AI is going to remove some of the barriers to adopting a value-based culture, and I think that is one of the bigger roadblocks that we kind of encounter a lot, especially with the boots on the ground, because it is quite a bit of change management that is required, quite a bit of redoing things in a new way. But with AI, some of those barriers are removed.
Yeah.
So basically, I think AI has the potential to do a lot of the heavy lifting, remove some of the barriers around change management and customer specific value positioning and communications. That being said, though, at the end of the day, you're going to have to take all of that and have a human conversation. And I keep harping on that as well. So the key is that you have a process in place that puts value in the forefront, leverage the capabilities of AI, become a power user, um, accept it with open arms and just go
Yes.
with it.
So I completely agree with you, Rashaqa. I think that AI is here, right? And I think there are some which are really embracing the technology, but as you said, I think it's just going to be part of an input to how we create value, how we understand value, how we deliver value, and how we actually price that value as well. And it is really about the end result and outcome. So
Mhm.
really, what is it that we're trying to achieve? There are certain things which, AI can facilitate, but of course, we still have to have human oversight to and human interaction, right?
Mhm.
At least in the next few years. And yeah, but I'm really excited. I think it is a world of opportunity now. So, what is your top recommendations? We'll just wrap up with the top recommendation and your last minute takeaway.
Sure. So I think the top one would be keep an open mind, be open to learning something new. It's very easy to get tunnel vision, and we are victims of it ourselves. It's just extremely easy. So listen to the voice of the customer. If done right, you're pretty much 70% of the way there in terms of designing and executing on a successful pricing and go-to-market strategy. And I would also say rinse and repeat. So you need a process in place. And once you have a process and methodology in place, you have to keep at it. It's not going to be perfect. There is no magic wand. But the more you do, it will get better. And of course, leverage AI so rinse, repeat AI. That's what you do.
Thank you, Rashaqa. And that brings us to the end of this episode of our VIP Value Innovation Pricing Vodcast. A huge thank you to my friend and colleague for sharing her expertise, stories, and practical wisdom. As highlighted, value and pricing are strategic levers for growth, resilience, and lasting customer impact. So if you've enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, give us feedback, and share with your network. And if there's topics you'd like to explore, connect with us at Ibbaka or via LinkedIn. So thanks for tuning in. Remember, value is core, innovate for value, and price for value. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. This has been great.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rashaqa.